If you truly want to be respected, stop chasing it. Respect isn't something that's handed out to those who beg for it. It gravitates toward those who stand firm in who they are. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor of Rome, never asked for validation. He didn't go around trying to be liked or explaining his every decision. Instead, he became a man who no longer needed approval because he eliminated the habits that weakened his presence. In one of the first habits he would urge you to break is the habit of over-explaining yourself. It might seem like a small thing, maybe even a polite gesture, but when you constantly feel the need to justify your actions, your choices, or your values, you're unknowingly giving away your power. You're teaching others that your decisions require their validation. Over time, you become less of a leader and more of a performer, someone who's acting for applause rather than living by principle. Marcus never said, "Make sure everyone understands why you did it." What he did say was, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." There's profound power in that. When you live aligned with your values, you don't need to defend every move. You simply act with quiet confidence. Every time you over-explain, you chip away at your authority. People start to sense hesitation. They hear the doubt behind your words. The more you talk, the more you expose yourself to criticism, to misunderstanding, and to judgment. And the worst part, you start making decisions based on what will be accepted, not what is right. You don't owe people a speech every time you say no. You don't have to present a case like a lawyer in court just because you chose peace over conflict or walked away from someone who disrespected your boundaries. If someone truly respects you, they won't demand an explanation. And if they don't, no explanation will ever satisfy them. Picture a lion standing in the tall grass. Does it explain why it roars? Or a mountain towering over the valley, does it justify its height? No, it simply is. Its presence speaks for itself. And that's the kind of presence you must cultivate. So let go of the habit of over-explaining. Live with clarity. Speak with intention. And let your silence carry the weight of your convictions. In a world addicted to noise, a man who doesn't feel the need to justify himself becomes someone others can't help but respect. There's a difference between living with honesty and constantly defending your decisions. One of the most subtle forms of insecurity is the habit of over-explaining, not because you owe clarity, but because you fear being misunderstood. Aurelius would see right through this. He'd call it what it is, a fear-driven performance that weakens your presence. You owe people honesty, you owe them integrity. But what you don't owe them is a 5-paragraph justification every time you choose peace over chaos. Pursue your own goals or enforce a boundary. You're not required to hold a press conference every time you say no. You don't have to plead your case just to earn basic respect, because the truth is those who truly respect you won't ask for an explanation. And those who demand one likely aren't interested in understanding you anyway. When you explain yourself too much, you dilute your position. Start sounding unsure of and when you're not. The more words you add, the more it seems like you're second-guessing yourself. People pick up on that. They smell the hesitation. And once they sense your doubt, they begin to question your choices, your confidence, your strength, and it doesn't end there. The more you explain, the more you expose. Every detail you share becomes a target for criticism. People start poking holes in your logic, not to help you but to assert their own opinions. Suddenly, your decision originally made with clarity and purpose is being debated by people who were never supposed to have a say. Even worse, you start conditioning yourself to seek approval. Over time, the internal compass that once guided your actions gets replaced by a constant need to be understood, accepted, and validated. You start asking, will they be okay with this? Instead of, is this right for me? But the Stoic mindset teaches us something different. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's all. No disclaimers. No sugarcoating, no validation hunting, just truth and action, rooted in values. Explaining something out of kindness or courtesy is fine. But when you begin to feel the need to prove yourself, especially to those who have already judged you, you've already handed them your power. Respect isn't built on being perfectly understood. It's built on being consistently principled. on doing what's right even when no one claps, even when no one agrees. A lion doesn't ask the jungle for permission to roar. A mountain doesn't write a thesis on why it stands tall. So why should you shrink to fit into spaces that were never designed for someone with your strength? Let your actions speak. Your silence, protect your peace. And let go of the exhausting need to justify who you are. Comfort is the quietest poison, deceptive, soothing, and deadly to your potential. It doesn't strike like a lightning bolt. Instead, it seeps in slowly, whispering that rest is earned, that ease is peace. But Marcus Aurelius, a man who governed an empire amidst war, chaos, and disease, warned us against this illusion. He didn't chase comfort, he trained his mind to resist it. Because comfort, when overindulged, doesn't just soften the body, it weakens the spirit. The world today is saturated in ease. We have soft beds, instant entertainment, food on demand, and we mistake this abundance for happiness. But in reality, it's slow decay. When comfort becomes your goal, growth becomes your enemy. You stop challenging your beliefs, stop pushing your limits, stop doing the hard things that build real strength. Why wake early when the bed is warm? Why pursue discipline when indulgence is easier? Comfort numbs your edge, dulls your discipline. You begin skipping commitments, justifying laziness, bending the rules you once honored. Worse, you start expecting everything to be easy. So when life inevitably delivers hardship, and it always does, you break. Not because you're weak by nature, but because you've been softened by too much ease. Marcus trained like a warrior, not for battle, but for life. He denied himself luxury to preserve clarity. He chose discomfort not as punishment, but as preparation. Why? Because he understood a universal truth. A man who resists comfort becomes unshakable. And don't think people can't tell. They notice. Your posture, your presence, your energy, they all signal whether you're hardened by struggle or dulled by indulgence. Respect doesn't go to the man who always chooses comfort. It goes to the one who can endure difficulty without flinching. The one who can walk through fire with steady steps and an undisturbed heart. Aurelius had access to every luxury imaginable, yet often chose simplicity. He slept on the floor, skipped lavish pleasures, not because he was a monk, but because he knew that comfort makes you forget your purpose. And a man who forgets his purpose forfeits his respect. Comfort kills legacy. No Stoic philosopher ever changed the world from their comfort zone. They lived for principle. They endured not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. They were forged in difficulty, and that's what made them unforgettable. So, remember, the path of least resistance never leads to greatness. Comfort may feel good now, but it demands a steep price later. Choose discomfort. Seek the challenge. Build a mind like Marcus, resilient, focused, and grounded in something deeper than pleasure. Because the man who doesn't need comfort too. Thrive is the one others admire, the one who earns unshakable, enduring respect. So be one, be firm, be clear, be unapologetically principled. In a world that constantly demands you compromise your values to fit in, the man who holds his ground is the one who rises. Respect isn't handed to those who scream the loudest or smile the brightest. It's earned in silence. It's built in discipline. And most of all, it's revealed in the decisions you make when no one's watching. Marcus Aurelius didn't live for admiration, didn't seek praise from the crowd or chase applause. What he chased was virtue, inner excellence, moral clarity. And because of that, his name echoes through time not as a man who tried to please the world, but as one who anchored himself to principle no matter the storm. Let that be your path too. Eliminate the habits that weaken youth and need to be liked, the fear of judgment, the temptation to explain away your standards. Instead, live with purpose. Speak with conviction. Move like someone who knows exactly who he is and who refuses to shrink for the comfort of others. The man who commands respect isn't necessarily the most charismatic or the most visible. Often he's the one quietly living with integrity, showing up with consistency, and doing what's right even when it's unpopular. Especially when it's unpopular. Because that's when character is tested. That's when real respect is earned. Imagine a life where your presence lingers, even when you're going to not because of what you said, but because of how you lived. That's the kind of life Stoicism calls us toward. A life so grounded in principle that even in your absence, your influence remains. Respect isn't about performance. It's about presence. It's about who you are in your core. Chasing admiration and start cultivating virtue, something shifts. You stop needing approval. You stop explaining yourself. Stop bending your values to win favor. Instead, you stand straight. You speak less, but when you do, it matters. And that's the legacy Marcus Aurelius left us. It's not one of perfection, but of principle. He didn't demand the world's approval. He lived in a way that made it unnecessary. So if this message resonates with you, don't just nod, apply it, embody it. Let it become your standard. Live like a Stoic, die with peace. And in between, command respect without ever needing to ask for it. There's a quiet fear most people carry one. They rarely admit the fear of being alone. It's not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. We've become addicted to noise scrolling endlessly, streaming constantly, surrounding ourselves with chatter not out of joy, but out of discomfort with silence. Why? Because in silence, we're finally confronted by the one person we've been avoiding ourselves. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of an empire and master of inner discipline, found strength not in constant companionship, but in solitude. In stillness, he faced his thoughts, examined his values, and wrote truths meant only for himself. He wasn't afraid of being alone. He welcomed it, because solitude, when embraced, doesn't weaken a man, reveals him. When you avoid solitude, you lose the chance to understand who you truly are. You begin absorbing the energy of the room, mimicking the people around you, shaping your identity based on trends and noise. You become reactive instead of reflective, and slowly you forget what you stand for. Solitude sharpens your edges. It strips away distractions and forces you to ask uncomfortable questions. What do I believe? What am I avoiding? Who am I becoming? These questions are the gateway to self-awareness. But they only emerge when the world goes quiet. Avoiding solitude also creates emotional dependency. If you always need someone around or noise in the background, you're signaling that your inner peace relies on external stimulation. That's a dangerous trade, because the moment those people or distractions disappear, your stability crumbles. The Stoic man, however, is self-contained. His peace is self-generated. He doesn't borrow clarity from the crowd, he builds it in the stillness of his mind. Marcus wrote, not for glory, but for grounding. He didn't write speeches, he wrote reminders. Nowhere, he said, can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. That's not loneliness, that's mastery. Solitude is also where standards rise. When you're not constantly adapting to the noise of others, you start living deliberately. You stop performing. You start thinking independently. You begin crafting a life by choice, not by default. So here's the truth. Solitude isn't emptiness, it's refinement. It's where the fog clears, where your intuition gets louder, and where your mind meets itself without filter. The man who fears being alone fears his own depth, but the man who embraces it becomes grounded, unshakable, and profoundly respected. Let others drown in distraction. You sit in silence, reflect, grow. Because the man who can stand alone with his thoughts and not flinch, that's a man who doesn't just earn respect, he commands it. There's a quiet form of self-betrayal that many people commit daily. It doesn't involve lies or loud drama. It starts with 2 words, I'm sorry, but not the kind of sorry that owns a mistake. This is the sorry you whisper when you stand up for yourself. When you enforce a boundary, when you expect more. Sorry, I don't tolerate disrespect. Sorry, I need consistency. Sorry, but I have standards. But here's the truth. When you apologize for your standards, you're not being. You're asking for permission to have dignity. That's a fast track to losing both your self-respect and the respect of others. Standards are not arrogance. They are not an attack. They are the structure that protects your time, your energy, and your worth. But in a world addicted to comfort and people-pleasing, clarity is often mistaken for cruelty. If you say, "I don't accept dishonesty," people will call you judgmental. If you say, "I expect clear communication," they'll say you're demanding, but that's not your problem, that's theirs. Every time you water down your standards to make others comfortable, you send yourself a message that your peace is negotiable, that your values can be bartered. Over time, you stop even believing in the boundaries you once held sacred. That erosion of self-trust is far more damaging than any outside rejection. Marcus Aurelius never apologized for living with integrity, said, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." He lived by principle, not popularity. And he knew that real leadership isn't loud, it's consistent. It's the quiet courage to stand firm when others waver. You don't need to justify why you want honesty, loyalty, or peace. You don't need to defend your right to walk away from people who bring chaos into your life. Your standards are built on reason, truth, and experience, then they don't need to be explained. They just need to be upheld. Let people feel uncomfortable when you hold the line. Let them call you too much, because over time they won't forget your strength. They'll remember the way you refuse to shrink. In a world of compromise, the man who stands firm becomes rare and respected. Stop apologizing for having standards, start living them. Respect isn't something you can demand. It isn't earned by raising your voice, flashing your achievements, or pretending to be more than you are. Respect real, lasting, soul-deep respect is earned in the quiet. It's shaped by your habits, revealed by your discipline, and proven by the choices you make when no one is watching. We live in a world obsessed with validation. People chase likes, applause, admiration. But Marcus Aurelius didn't. He didn't need to be admired. He needed to be aligned. Aligned with his values, aligned with truth, aligned with the quiet dignity of a man who lives by principle, not performance. If you want to earn respect, stop chasing attention and start cultivating presence. Eliminate the habits that weaken your character: over-explaining, procrastinating, excessive comfort, people-pleasing, fear of solitude, and apologizing for your standards. These aren't quirks. They are leaks in your integrity. Every time you let them run unchecked, you erode the very foundation of the self-respect you're trying to build. You don't need the approval of the crowd. You don't need permission to act with honor. You certainly don't need to fit in to prove your worth. The man who walks in silence, who keeps his word, who leads himself first, that man becomes unshakable. He becomes respected not because he asked for it, but because he embodied it. Live in such a way that your absence is still felt, that your actions echo after you're gone, that your example becomes someone else's turning point. Let your life be a quiet rebellion against mediocrity. Marcus Aurelius didn't leave us a book of commands. He left us a mirror. His meditations reflect a man wrestling with weakness, holding himself accountable, and choosing virtue daily. Didn't pretend to be flawless. He chose to be principled, and that's what made him unforgettable. So here's the challenge. Stop chasing admiration. Chase virtue. No, stop begging for it. Respect. Start building a life that naturally commands it. In your habits, in your discipline, in the stillness of your mind and the consistency of your actions. Live like a Stoic. Die with peace. And in between, let every moment be a quiet act of strength. Because the most powerful men in history didn't speak the loudest, they lived the truest. People often assume respect is earned once and kept forever. That's not how it works. Respect is fragile. It's built slowly, quietly, and can be lost in moments. One of the fastest ways to lose it is through inconsistency and overexposure. When your words no longer align with your actions, when you speak more than you show, people stop listening. They stop believing. In a world filled with constant noise, the person who always talks but rarely delivers becomes background static. You say you value discipline, yet you break your own rules. You preach boundaries, yet you allow disrespect. You speak of purpose, yet wander aimlessly. It's not the volume of your voice, but the weight of your follow-through that earns trust. Marcus Aurelius lived in a position where every word he said could become law, but he chose his words carefully and lived them even more deliberately. He knew that every principle, if not lived out, becomes a performance. That's why he reminded himself, not the public, to be strict with yourself and tolerant with others. His standards were personal, not performative. When you constantly share your goals but never act, when you tell the world your standards but fail to uphold them, you invite doubt. People begin to see the gap between who you say you are and how you actually live. And the greater that gap, the less they respect you. Because at the heart of respect lies one thing: consistency. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have. To be accountable, you have to be deliberate. You have to move like someone who means what they say and says what they mean. People don't expect you to get it right every time, but they do expect you to stand by your word and grow through your mistakes. So if you want to be respected, speak less, act more. And when you do speak, let it be backed by action and guided by values. Let your presence carry more power than your promises. Let your life become the message. Because respect doesn't come from attention, it comes from alignment. And in a noisy world, the person whose actions echo louder than their voice is the one who will be remembered. Not everyone will understand you, and that's okay. Respect is not a popularity. Contest is not about being understood by the many, but about being aligned with the few things that matter. Your values, your integrity, your word. In life, there will be people who misread your silence as weakness. They'll mistake your distance as arrogance. They won't understand why you walk away instead of fight, why you choose peace over drama, or why you remain calm when others panic. But that's not your burden to carry. Stoic man doesn't seek to be known. He seeks to be solid. He lives in such a way that he doesn't need to justify his choices, because his actions speak with consistency. He doesn't explain himself to people who refuse to listen. He doesn't lower his standards just to be liked. And he definitely doesn't compromise his values to fit someone else's expectations. There's something rare about a man who can sit in a room full of noise and remain unmoved. Something powerful about someone who doesn't feel the need to post every thought, prove every point, or broadcast every success. Because in the silence of restraint, strength begins to echo. Marcus Aurelius could have commanded attention at any moment, but instead of seeking more eyes, he turned inward. He wrote to himself. He corrected himself. He didn't demand respect. He cultivated it in the quiet moments when no one was watching. In doing so, he became unforgettable. Too many people chase admiration, thinking it will fill the void. But admiration fades. What remains is the quiet influence of a man who never sold himself out for applause. His life becomes an example, not because it was loud, but because it was real. So live in a way that doesn't require explanation. Let your actions define your beliefs. Let your routine reflect your discipline. Let your silence earn more trust than any speech ever could. Because in the end, people may not remember everything you said, but they will remember the way you made them feel. Calm, steady, focused. That's what respect is built on. Not words, not charisma, but character. Some men speak of power. Others walk in it silently, calmly, without needing to announce themselves. In a world obsessed with noise, visibility, and performance, the most respected figures are often the quietest. They don't need attention because they carry presence. They don't seek validation because they know their worth. This is what Marcus Aurelius taught, not with speeches, but with stillness. You see, true power doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to dominate a room with ego. It's in the man who sits back, listens carefully, and chooses his words with precision. It's in the one who acts deliberately, not reactively, who doesn't crumble under pressure because his foundation is built on principle, not performance. Today, many confuse visibility with value. They believe that if no one sees them, they don't matter. So they perform, they overshare, they overspeak. But in trying to be seen, they become transparent, predictable, even forgettable. The one who is remembered is the one who speaks only when necessary, who withholds more than he reveals, and whose silence carries the weight of thought and character. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, had all the power to speak endlessly, yet he spent his nights writing, not proclamations, but private reminders to himself, reminders to be better, 2. Be kinder, to stay disciplined, to live by virtue. He wasn't interested in appearing powerful. He wanted to be powerful, powerful in restraint, in consistency, in inner command. That's the kind of man who earns respect. It's not the one who performs for the world, but the one who commands himself. When no one is watching, because that's when it counts. Anyone can act virtuous in public. The real test is how you live in private. That's where your habits are forged, your principles are tested, and your legacy is written. So if you want to command respect, don't chase the spotlight. Build yourself in the dark. Let your quiet choices compound into visible strength. Let others shout while you build, because when the storm hits, the loudest voice often fades. First, but the man who remains silent, grounded, and focused. He's the one who leads. You don't have to chase the spotlight to have influence. In fact, the most powerful men in history rarely asked to be seen. They didn't beg for recognition. They let their actions shape their legacy. That's what separates men who are remembered from those who are simply noticed. The ones who make a real impact aren't loud. They're intentional. Respect doesn't come from how many people know your name. It comes from how you carry yourself when no one's watching. It's in the discipline to do the right thing when there's no applause. It's in how you treat people who can't give you anything in return. It's in your ability to walk away from anything that compromises your values, even when it costs you comfort. Marcus Aurelius lived with that kind of quiet power. As emperor of Rome, he could have demanded worship. Instead, he chose to serve, to think, to lead with humility and restraint. His meditations weren't declarations. They were self-corrections. He didn't write to impress others. He wrote to align himself. And that's why we still quote him over 1,000 years later. We live in a world where influence is often mistaken for attention. But the two couldn't be more different. Attention is cheap. You can buy it, beg for it, or fake it. Influence, on the other hand, is earned. And it's earned over time through consistency, through struggle, and through a life lived by principle. The man who doesn't need the crowd is the man the crowd respects. He moves with calm. He speaks only when necessary. He doesn't argue. To prove his point, he proves it through the way he lives. That's what Stoicism teaches. That power isn't about domination. It's about self-mastery. So if you want to lead, start by leading yourself. Build a life that doesn't depend on praise. Become someone who inspires, not because of what you say, but because of how you show up day after day, moment after moment, quietly choosing the hard road over the easy one. Because in the end, the loudest man in the room is often the most uncertain. But the man who doesn't need to be loud, he's already won the only battle that matters, the one within. Respect doesn't begin with how others see you. It begins with how you see yourself. You can't command respect externally if you constantly betray your own values internally. And yet so many people do. They bend for approval, shrink. In fear of rejection, they abandon their principles just to avoid discomfort. But Marcus Aurelius didn't. He lived like a man who knew that self-respect was the foundation of all other respect. The world will always tempt you to compromise just a little, just this once. But each small compromise chips away at something essential, your inner alignment. And the moment you start living to please others, rather than to live by principle, you begin to disappear. Not in body, but in spirit. The Stoic knows this. That's why he builds discipline like armor. Not to look tough, but to stay rooted. Because when the noise comes, and it always does, he won't flinch. When criticism hits, he doesn't fold. When praise comes, he doesn't lose himself in it. He remains grounded, unmoved by both insult and applause. Marcus didn't live for show. He lived with a mission, to become the kind of man he could respect when he looked in the mirror each night. He wasn't trying to be impressive. He was trying to be aligned. And that's the most powerful kind of presence. The man who doesn't perform for admiration because he already lives by conviction. If you want respect, stop chasing people's approval. Start honoring your own word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you hold a value, protect it. If you set a boundary, enforce it. Not because it's easy, but because every time you uphold a standard, you reinforce who you are. That's what Stoicism gives you: the strength to walk alone if needed, the clarity to act without needing validation, the courage to be consistent when everyone else is swaying. So the next time you feel tempted to waver, remember, it's not about how others see you. It's about how you'll respect yourself tomorrow. Because when your life becomes your proof, when your actions match your values, you won't need to ask for respect. It will follow you, quietly, relentlessly, permanently, in a world that rewards speed and loud reactions. The man who pauses, who breathes before responding, who thinks before acting, becomes rare, and that rarity commands respect. Too many people live in reaction. They hear an insult and fire back. They feel offended and retaliate, experience discomfort, and immediately seek relief. But Marcus Aurelius showed us a different way. He showed us the strength of restraint, the dignity of discipline, the clarity of choosing response over reaction. You see, emotional reactivity is not a sign of power, it's a sign of instability. Anyone can yell, anyone can lash out. Not everyone can stay calm when chaos strikes. Not everyone can hold their tongue when provoked. Not everyone can maintain their values when tested. That's why people admire those who do. Because deep down, we all know how hard it is to remain composed when the world is pushing every one of your buttons. And when someone does, they earn a kind of respect that's not given, it's felt. Quietly, powerfully, permanently. Marcus didn't ask to be respected. He worked to become respectable. Not by being perfect, but by being principled. When anger rose, he questioned it. When desires flared, he examined them. When pride whispered, he humbled himself. That's what real strength looks like. Not muscle or dominance, but mastery over your own impulses. So if you want to stand out, don't be the loudest. Be the most stable. Be the one who doesn't need to clap back to prove a point. Be the one who can sit with discomfort without crumbling. Be the one who thinks long-term when others live moment to moment. Stoicism isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. It's not about suppressing emotions. It's about channeling them. It's the difference between a fire that burns wild and one that warms a home. The same energy, just directed with intention. Let others be driven by ego. Let others race. To win arguments, you win with silence. Win with patience. Win with consistency. Let your life be the proof, not your temper. Because in the end, respect isn't won in outbursts. It's earned in restraint. And the man who can master his inner world becomes unshakable in the outer one. There's a kind of strength that doesn't get celebrated often. It's not the strength to fight. It's the strength to walk away, to leave a pointless argument, to exit a toxic dynamic, to disengage from the chaos that seeks to drag you down. Not because you're weak, but because you value your peace more than proving a point. Marcus Aurelius never said to fight every battle. In fact, he often reminded himself to rise above them, to not be dragged into the emotional storms of others, to act, not react, to stand firm, not be pulled into pettiness. That's not avoidance, that's mastery. Respect is not earned by showing up to every confrontation. It's earned by knowing which ones are beneath you. Some people will bait you. Some will misunderstand you on purpose. Others will provoke just to see if you'll break. But when you choose silence over escalation, presence over panic, you show a different kind of power. The world teaches men to be reactive, defend yourself, protect your pride, never back down. But Stoicism flips that on its head. It teaches you that dignity is often found in your restraint, that choosing to disengage isn't surrender, it's strategy, it's control, strength under pressure. Marcus ruled the most powerful empire in the world, yet he constantly reflected on the importance of humility, patience, and emotional discipline. Why? Because he understood that external power means nothing if you're a slave to your emotions. A man who must always respond, who can't ignore. Disrespect is not free. He's bound by ego, by insecurity, by fear of appearing weak. But the man who can remain calm, who can let others talk and not take the bait, that man is dangerous in the best way. He's unshakable. He's respected, not for his volume, but for his presence. Not for his arguments, but for his example. So don't waste your energy proving yourself to people who've already made up their minds. Don't trade your peace for momentary pride. You don't need to attend every battle you're invited to. Some of the strongest men are those who chose to walk away not because they couldn't fight, but because they knew the war wasn't worth it. In the end, the habits you remove shape you just as much as the ones you build. The man who earns respect isn't defined solely by what he does, but by what he refuses to do. He refuses to gossip. He refuses to react emotionally. He refuses to abandon his values for convenience. And because of that, he becomes someone others can trust, admire, and follow. Every habit you eliminate makes room for strength. When you stop chasing people, you start attracting the right ones. When you stop oversharing, you become mysterious powerful. When you stop explaining yourself to everyone, you regain your time, your energy, your peace. And when you stop fighting for attention, you gain control over the only thing that matters, yourself. Marcus Aurelius didn't leave us a rule book. He left us reminders. Gentle, firm, brutally honest reminders to look inward and clean house. To question our impulses. To cut the dead weight of ego, approval, seeking, and noise, and in doing so, to become free. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful, but you do need to be principled. You need to know what you stand for, and even more importantly, what you will no longer tolerate in yourself. Because discipline isn't just about routines, it's about removal. It's about saying that habit no longer serves me, and having the courage to walk away from it. Respect doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being aligned. Your thoughts, your actions, and your values, all pointing in the same direction. That kind of man is rare. That kind of man becomes unforgettable. So if you've been waiting for a sign to reset, to drop the baggage, to let go of the habits that hold you back, this is it. Let it go. Choose better. Show up differently. Let the final habit you eliminate be the belief that you're not ready. Because you are. You've always been. You just needed to see yourself clearly. Now it's time to act silently, consistently, powerfully. Because respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you become.